So the great 17th century Baroque painter Caravaggio, which many of you probably have seen many of his paintings before, is just a brilliant artist. And there's so many great examples of biblical scenes and things about Catholicism and Christianity that he's done. And he's very well acclaimed and very popular for many reasons. But there's one painting in particular that I recall that he did that was very much rejected and people did not like at all. And the title of the painting is called The Death of the Virgin. And so after Mass, not during it, you can look it up if you want to see it, but called The Death of the Virgin. Why did people reject it and not like this painting? Because for one reason, it depicts the Virgin Mary's death. And that, in a sense, goes against church teaching because the church actually isn't definitive on what actually happened after Mary's life on earth. The only thing the Catechism says is that when Mary's earthly life was finished, she was assumed into heaven, body and soul. And we believe that to be the case because she was immaculately conceived. She was sinless, so she goes straight up to heaven, which is why I will not go straight up to heaven, but we're working on it. So, first of all, it goes against church doctrine. So that's one thing, no big deal. The other problem is she's there laying horizontally on a bed, and there's a bunch of people surrounding her, and she just looks like a very common woman. She's dressed almost as a peasant, if you will. There's really not a lot of dignity. Her feet are bare, and it was just people were taken aback by it because when you look at paintings of the Virgin Mary and the angels and the saints, they're very dignified. There's angels, there's saints everywhere. That's like this glorious, scene. And here's just what Caravaggio seemed to paint, this common woman, and people obviously didn't like it for those reasons either. So it was rejected, and for good reason probably. But although that's the case, I think we can learn something from it. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we think about these great holy feast days and realities of our faith, like the Assumption, the Ascension, the Nativity, the Resurrection, many times when we see these pictures or these paintings, they're very glorious, they're very idealistic, and we forget that we are not actually separated from them. Sometimes we think we're kind of separated, like that's such a heavenly thing, it's such a holy thing, I'm not like that. I'm just a simple person from Twinsburg, Ohio. That's not going to be me. But to see a picture that Caravaggio did in a very realistic manner reminds us that all these realities that we celebrate is not just for the holy people, but it's for you and for me as well. Yes, Mary was assumed into heaven. Jesus ascended into heaven. Jesus was resurrected. That's going to be us too. Like this is for our good because we realize as followers of Christ, we're called to the very same thing that they did. No matter what sins we have done, no matter how frail we are, we're called to follow in their footsteps. That's why Mary is the model of the church. That's why she's the first disciple because she says yes to God at the Annunciation. And as Mary followed Christ without reservation, followed the will of the Father, and was taken up into heaven, it's the same goal for you and for me. So we have to have a realistic look as to what we celebrate and to realize that this is the goal for you and for me as well. And it's not just for certain people, but this is the responsibility and really the invitation that the Lord is calling us to take part in. That's one reason, too, if you've ever seen The Chosen, I really like what they've done. I'm only up to like season 3, but Jonathan Rumi, who expresses Jesus and who plays him in a very human role. I think that's great because, again, when you look at holy cards and sacred art, Jesus is very pious looking. He's almost like mechanical and robotic in a sense, and there's something divine about that, and there's something good about that, but we lose sight of his full humanity. And again, we have to remember, like, Jesus is fully human in all things like us except for sin. And so all these things that we celebrate, we are called to take part in as well. So my hope is that as we pray about this great solemnity, this great feast in our church, may we realize this is not just about Mary, the Mother of God. It's not just about Jesus, but we're celebrating the fact that God is inviting ourselves into this same reality itself. And that is a great reason for rejoicing and giving him thanks and praise, no matter how great of sinners that we are. So as we gather around this altar, may we be realistic about what we celebrate and also in hopes for what is going to happen in the life to come. So through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin, may we too follow her and follow her Son into the heavenly kingdom.